Welcome to Business Savages with your host, Olia Gravel. This is the meeting place for Entrepreneur Anonymous, where stories that never get published on LinkedIn come to the surface. In each episode, we invite an entrepreneur to share their raw, unfiltered journey and the lessons they've learned from it. Whether you're in the trenches seeking validation or advice, or simply wondering if starting is even worth it, this is your space. Thanks for joining us today, and let the confession booth begin. Hi everyone, welcome back to Business Savages. This week, I have a guest from the other side, as I put it. You're probably very familiar with my conversations with startup founders and other entrepreneurs, but this time I've got somebody who looks at them from the other side. Her name is Neyla Merheb, and she's a venture capitalist, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. So as a short introduction, I'm an investor in venture capital. So I'm based out of Paris. We do venture capital for health tech companies that are usually not very early stage, mostly Series A, Series B. So I have a finance background, started my career in investment banking in New York. So I've lived in New York, in Dubai, in Lebanon. So I'm Lebanese, grew up between Paris and Beirut and moved a lot. And I've been living in Paris for the past 6 years now, working in venture capital, first in a CVC, in a corporate venture capital fund. And now in a venture capital fund, in a financial venture capital fund.
That sounds pretty intimidating, to be honest, but you're pretty mobile and global. And the first question I would like to ask you is the following. Obviously, finance, investment, and especially venture capital is a very male-dominated industry. How did you decide to get into it? I mean, it probably takes a lot of courage to do that.
So actually, venture capital investment was not really the first thing I've done in my career. So I started with investment banking, and actually my first internship was on the trading floor, which was even more male dominated than venture capital or private equity now. And I've chosen this path for no specific reason, to be honest. I went to a business school. It was the logical path. I loved finance. I loved my courses of finance. At the time, financial markets were booming, and it was the thing to do at the time. So did my internship in New York at SocGen at Société Générale, and then redirected myself into investment banking project finance in Lebanon at Gazprom Bank. I worked in impact investing in New York for the Clinton Global Initiative, and I joined back the private sector in Dubai, worked for Air Liquide, which is a French company, the leading company for industrial gases. And this is where I really knew that I wanted to move towards investments, private equity or venture capital, because I've worked within a huge company like Air Liquide in corporate finance, and it enabled me to really understand finance from within a big company, how it works, the processes, to understand what's behind finance, actually, what's behind the P&L. And so I wanted to see that for small companies, and to be able to contribute to the growth of small companies, to reach a bigger scale, to become bigger, to become maybe not as big as a CAC 40 company, but to help a company scale. And this is what venture capitalists do. So this company, Air Liquide, enabled me to join their VC fund in Paris. So this is when I moved from Dubai to Paris. Mm-hmm. And so I stayed there for 5 years, gained a lot of experience, confirmed that this is what I really wanted to do. And so the logical next step was to join a proper financial VC fund.
Did you at any point feel intimidated because, as you have mentioned yourself, this is a very male-dominated industry, especially as a woman of a very, international background, because you've jumped so many places?
Not really. Maybe I never really had this intimidation. Maybe it comes from the fact that I was always in a male-dominated environment. So when I was younger, I was in high school. I was in a Jesuit high school. It was a boys' school initially, with a very little minority of women, of girls. So I grew up with mostly boys around me, men. So it was nothing very different. And then, in New York, it was the same on the trading floor. And then in project finance as well, working for Gazprom Bank. It wasn't strange to me because this is how I started my career. And
I see.
this is also how I grew up. And this was high school to me. It was always the case. So it was nothing new or strange to me or intimidating. So I think the opposite would have been like more difficult for me to go into like a very female dominated environment would have been like more difficult for me.
That's super ironic because I, for some reason, feel the same. It's easier for me to work with men, and I've mostly had like male managers and mentors. My best mentors were males, and I have never felt, what maybe some other women feel during their careers. This whole sexual harassment and all of the different shapes and forms. Even though I want to say in my what do you call them, like bloom years in the U.S., it was a big topic. So, do you think this confidence around the, I guess, the opposite gender, does it have to do with the self-confidence?
I think it's a lot to do with the self-confidence. It has a lot to do with your own environment and what you're used to, because at the end of the day, it's a question of training. It's a question of habits. It's a question of like knowing how to deal with them. And also I think it's your attitude that also provokes the other's attitude. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
I mean, it's a combination of a lot of things.
I just thought, funny thing is, I'm a bit closer with my father than I'm with my mother, and I feel like a lot more comfortable when I'm around him. We're just like completely same type of person. So I think for me personally, it must have influenced the fact that it's easier for me to work with men compared to women.
Yeah, for sure. And even like, being closer to your dad and your mom, or even like for me, when I was younger, when I was a kid, I had more guy friends than girlfriends. I was never the girly type who used to like play with dolls and
I
Barbies and
hear that.
stuff. I
Hmm.
was more like playing with like boys outside, outdoors, coming back with bruises and climbing. And so I was never, so I have difficulties now to be sitting on a table of like only women talking about like, only hair or clothes. I can do that, but not for a long period. So I'm maybe more at ease with guys, like conversations with guys than with women sometimes. So of course it changes when you
Right.
grow older, but yeah, I think the environment plays a big role.
It's true. But I
Yeah,
also
and
feel
I
like,
think also
mhm,
that the fact that the more you're exposed, like the more you travel, you're exposed to like different nationalities, different cultures, different type of people. It pushes you to be more flexible. Whether it's not only about gender, it's like also about like different cultures. It's different personalities, and the fact that you were exposed to very different people, and at a very young age, um, it doesn't seem like an obstacle to be dealing with men. It's not that strange, it's not that different.
that's true. I remember when we were talking at the Sifted Summit, you basically said that when you're the only woman, sorry, in the room, they're actually listening to you a lot more because you're like the unique element inside the like 90% testosterone environment.
Exactly. I think it helps lower the level of testosterone in the room, especially when there are like conflicts or, it's a bit tense, which happens a lot,
Right,
at a
right.
board meeting or like among investors. It can happen a lot. And so I think that women, and this is why I think we like diversity and like people want to be like more into diversity and inclusion. It's because they know that I think both are essential, men and women. Like I don't I'm not into the women empowerment, like, clicking with women and stuff. I think like both are important because I think women bring a different approach. I think they have more emotional intelligence or more, they're more sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so they help lower down the testosterone level. They have a different approach in a more calm way. It helps lower the tension. I think it's essential to have, for example, around the table at a board meeting, at least some women, like one or two at least at the board.
I have this, I guess, really bad example from my career when I was the only female manager in the company, and it was actually a French company. So, needless to say, I did not feel very comfortable because they were basically saying, well, yeah, you're sitting here at the table and we know you have something to say, but we're going to do whatever we want anyways. And that was the time that really like racked my confidence because I knew what I was talking about. It was quite recent. So I was not, like a mid-level person. I was already senior level person. And that for me was so, I guess, shocking and surprising because I've never dealt with that either in Russia where I grew up or needless to say in the US. Like in the US, it would rarely happen, especially like nowadays, it would never happen. So do you feel like you never experienced that thanks to the cultures that you were in, like all the geographical places? Or was it really just like, I don't know, well-educated man that would never do something like this?
I think it's a mix of both. I think I was lucky, to be honest. I think I realize now when I hear people's story, I think I really feel lucky because I used to take for granted. To be honest, I used to like not understand why this gender fight was a fight or why was it an issue, because maybe I was one lucky, and second also the environments where, to answer your question, where I've worked are, so if you sum it up, I was in so investment banking I think was the harshest among them all, where I could have had this kind of like situation.
Right.
But my life experience, especially being in a big corporate, this can hardly happen because, big corporates pay a lot of attention. They pay more
That's
attention
true.
to those details and to like
Mm-hmm.
diversity and including women and promoting them and blah, blah. Then even your skills, like it's even more important that you are respected as a woman. And so I did not feel that at all. So it's the environment as well. And I'm sure, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm sure it exists. And like in some parts of the world, in some specific fields, in some companies and cultures, like company cultures, for sure. And I'm sure it's still prevalent. But I think I was lucky not to have experienced that.
I think so too. And to even go further a little bit down that road, as you might recall, at the Seafood Summit, there was a panel that was dedicated to sexual harassments that happened towards female founders from the male investors. Um, have you ever experienced something like this as a female investor, maybe from other investors or founders or, say, lawyers or whoever other players might be in that ecosystem?
So unfortunately, I missed that session at Sifted. No, fortunately, I did not have to witness such a situation. But also, it's also a lot about the type of business relationship that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So, if it's a relationship of subordination or if it's a relationship of investor-investee. So, when you're the investee and you're looking for funds, you're, I'm not going to say in a position of weakness, but you're the one who's asking for funds. So you're more
Right.
prone to be harassed or for the other person to like take advantage or abuse the situation than if you are an investor, because found like the
Right.
right
You're in the position of power.
founder is never, even like the service providers like lawyers and would never, I think, I mean, I might be wrong and I'm sure it exists, but it is more difficult for them to be inappropriate or to, talk down to a woman when she is, because he's also the client of the investor. So it's a type of, it's a dynamic, it's a type of a relationship, but also that changes the situation. And luckily, I was on the right side where it's more difficult, I would say, to like be
Right.
inappropriate. But I never witnessed like someone who. And also, we shouldn't forget that there are different types of investments. I am in really in the field of like tech, and it's health tech, but it's AI, it's a lot of engineers, it's a lot of data scientists. So it
Well, mostly men, right?
then, but like
A
that's
different background,
yes, I'm not saying it in a negative way, but they're like into their thing. They're,
right?
passionate. So it's
So
less,
they're
I
like
think.
scientists, more scientists and less like flashy something.
Exactly. It's not bankers. It's not
Right.
what I've lived in investment banking, where it
Mm-hmm.
was really, really a different world. Like nothing to compare with VC. Like if I had to compare with like now investment now in 2024 to investment banking, like trading floor in
Totally different.
2009, 2010, it was really different. It was like no boundaries. They really thought that, I think they were on high, and they could do whatever
The
they
Wolf
want.
of Wall Street.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, totally. So yeah, I think it's more or less, I'm sure it happens all the time, but I don't think it's the worst environment for like sexual harassment, and
Yeah, I get
also
that.
we also need to define sexual harassment, because we may not all have the same definition of sexual harassment, because there's a thin line between sexual harassment and a guy who's just you know wants to try his luck, who's just like trying to
That's
seduce a
true.
woman, whether she's an investor or a founder, or men could be men anywhere. For me, this is not sexual harassment. For me, sexual harassment, there's harassment in the word. So for me, sexual harassment has to be like really somebody harassing you, constantly insisting. So this is very difficult in this environment today. It's a small world. It can be very quickly known, whether you're a founder or an investor or a lawyer. It's I think you're putting an end to your career, because it's such a small world. It's such a small world. Like really, whether you're like in Paris or in London, or everybody knows everybody, and everybody knows like the stories and stuff. So I think, whereas if you compare with banking, they don't
It's
care,
so
as
big,
long as
yeah.
like you're making numbers, you're like contributing to the P&L, and you're like so I think it's very limited. I hope it's limited to some extent.
What I've heard on that, I guess it was a workshop, not a panel, because there were a lot of contributors. Basically, they were saying that stories get shared between founders, but it never really gets shared between the investors. So the founders just would learn from each other that, okay, this guy, this investor guy was really inappropriate. So like, don't raise funds from him. But then apparently what's lacking is that other investors would know that this person was inappropriate, but they wouldn't do anything about it. There was one guy who now runs kind of like a database for investment, and he was like, yeah, if I learn something like this, obviously I like disallow these people from my database. And he's like, and this is my contribution as a man in this
Yeah.
industry. But he was basically saying it's very rare. It's kind of like Hollywood, I want to say, because it's so like secluded.
Yeah.
That's what I understood. It's also like it's hard to get into. So they kind of probably get the idea of like, oh, I can do whatever I want because I'm already in. And those founders who need the money, oh well, what can they do? Are they gonna like go report me to police or somebody else? There is like no authority in the venture capital, right? They're
Yeah.
probably just feeling like they're never gonna be
Thoughts.
caught or or punished. Yeah, exactly. So when I was listening to it, I was like, oh man, I didn't realize it was at that scale. But there were some borderline cases. You just brought this up. For example, if investors just ask you for a drink, it's like, hey, do you want to like finish this conversation over a
Mhm.
drink?
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't think too much into that, but
Yeah.
there were some people that were citing this, and I'm like, that's not fair. That's like really taking this out of proportion. Like maybe he's just a friendly person, you know? I have to say this happened to me several times when I would propose this and the other person would take it as me, you know, trying to be too friendly. And I'm like, no, no, no. I really just
Yeah.
wanted to get a drink, you know?
Yeah.
But I feel
Well,
like you said, it's like it's two different spectrums now. There are people
yeah.
who maybe like underreport, as we say, and there are other people who say like everything is sexual harassment, whereas it's maybe
Exactly.
just somebody being a human, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is where I tend to disagree because so this can happen in any context. You can be at the supermarket and a guy can
Right,
say no
exactly.
and like, ask you for a drink and you just need to say yes or no. And even if you're so for example, sometimes you have to like also set the limits and the boundaries so that you don't find yourself in situations
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody asked me, for example, this is like a small technicality, small detail, but on my business card, there's my phone number, and my phone number is the same, like professional and personal. But I did not activate WhatsApp on my professional number and on this number. WhatsApp is on my Lebanese number, which is an old number that I keep all the time. Everybody asks me, why is your WhatsApp on your Lebanese number? I'm like, because I don't want every person I give my business card to text me and send me WhatsApp and
Right.
invite me for drinks and stuff. So you put your own limits, your own boundaries. And if you feel that somebody is like maybe crossing the line and you just put the boundaries, and think we're dealing with adults, unless he's sick, like like this is another case. But if it's a simple like, do you want to go for drinks? You just can't say no. It's not that difficult.
Yeah, for me, it's like there is this, and there is another. What I heard was like, oh, we should like finish this conversation in my hotel room. I mean, like, yeah, clearly that's a red
Yeah.
flag, and you should. For me, it's like no matter what, no money, no funding is worth jeopardizing, you know, your integrity. So for me, it's like you don't put yourself in this situation in the first place. Okay, I understand. I've been in the founder position before. You need the money, but like, are you really gonna like go so far to get the money? And then it's like people are reporting this. Okay, he proposed this, and obviously it's not okay to propose something like this. Obviously, just taking advantage of the situation that the one person is asking, another one has something to give. The venture capital. So to me, just like don't even like entertain it. And I have to say, as a female in my early career, sometimes I would entertain, you know, when there would be like a lot of people, a lot of men around the table, especially managers, and they would be making some sexist jokes, like talking about their whatever partners and something. I would like be laughing with them because I was so young, and I was like, of course, like I need to be laughing with them. But now I don't allow this anymore. If even my friends or my colleagues, if I hear something sexist or that puts women at disadvantage, I'm like, no, like you cannot talk like this, or no, you don't talk like this in front of me. So I try to put boundaries for, I guess, other women as well, if that makes sense. But now
Yeah.
I have confidence to do it. Like 10 years ago, I
Yeah.
would have never done it because I would be just too scared to be excluded from the table moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when you mentioned this hotel room thing, it reminded me of an episode that I had in the U.S. in New York when I was in at Société Générale. We went out for drinks with some colleagues from from the bank and from like outside the bank, and so I was talking to this guy. I think he was a trader at the time, and we're talking like in a friendly way. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very sociable. I talk to everyone, so I don't know. We were debating on something, and at some point it was like the end of the night. We're all leaving, and then he gives me a piece of paper with a number like 296, and I'm like, what's this? And he's like, this is my hotel room, and I'm like, and for me it was so absurd, and even though I was like very young. I just laughed and in front of everybody. So he felt really ridiculous, like really ridiculous because I just laughed and I said like in front of everybody, it's like, this is his hotel room. Like, I don't know what's the message, but I don't think I got the message. So there are some ways also to make them feel ridiculous because they are, because they think they're entitled and but again I see that less in venture capital.
I see. I see. To switch this up a little bit, When you mentioned that most of the founders that you deal with are men because it has to do with the verticals, I guess. Um, do you feel like they treat you differently as a female investor? Like, for example, if you're sitting around the table with your male colleagues, would they have a different presentation for you? Do they talk to you in a different way, or is it just they don't really change anything?
So I'm going to answer this one, but it's very subjective. So that's my own impression. It's based on
Mm-hmm.
not, there's no proof, or it's just my own feeling that sometimes, not all the time, I would say, and again, I don't know if it's the gender or the seniority, but when I would be like in a meeting with a founder, for example, with a colleague who's like older than like more senior and a male, um, I feel that the founder is reacting differently in the sense where he's more scared, I would say, or I wouldn't say like more respectful, but he'd be more careful what he says, what he presents, answers the question very quickly. Uh, I think they're more impressed with male investors than female investors.
I
I think
see.
but this is an impression. I
Mm-hmm.
think they tend to take for granted women, like in the investment world. Like, yeah, this is my own impression, but I might be wrong.
Do you feel like you're more empathetic when it comes to founders as an investor because you're a woman?
I'm sure, and I'm sure they might sometimes want to abuse this, like they would go through the woman to get whatever they want or to and at the end of the day it's negotiation, so
Right.
it's both are playing. So women again I think have like higher emotional intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
so they know how to get what they want or to get where they want to in a very smooth way, whereas I think men are more like blunt and
Brusque.
exactly. So I think it's a game on both sides. Like I think they will, take advantage of the sensitivity, and also the woman is gonna like take advantage of that. And but for sure, what's sure is that the dynamic is different. Like a woman dealing with a man, whether it's like a founder and an investor, or the other way around, or it will always be different than two men dealing with each other. And just as it will be different if it's two women dealing with each other. And I think that we always like talk about like a woman being surrounded by men or being in a male dominated environment, but we never talk about like women and women, because I think that women can be harder to deal with as a woman than men, because I think
There is immediately some competition. I don't know why, but like
exactly.
I feel it all the time.
Yeah, it's the women intra-gender
Yep.
competition, you know. But it's like I've been bullied by a woman. I've never been bullied by a man. I've been bullied
Same.
by a woman at work.
Same.
Surely bullied. And she did not only bully me. I found out that she bullied before me other women, and afterward. And the men, she was just like taking care of them and like always nice with them, and
I
yeah,
definitely experienced that at like mid level of my career when I was in Washington D.C. in this big crisis communications firm. First of all, it felt like it was some I don't know what some VIP environment. I mean, it was run by a pretty famous guy at a time, and everybody around me. There were a lot of girls of my age. I was like 27, 26, something like this, and I felt like I was back in high school where it was like, like, oh, you cannot sit with us because we are already here and you're new. So like they were like literally putting me to the side and
yeah,
ignoring. And I was like, what the hell? And all the men were so nice to me. Clearly, I just worked with men all the time.
yeah, 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 yeah,
This is just
definitely.
so ridiculous and so sad because we should be like empowering each other no matter what. And we're doing the opposite. I don't think it's
Yeah.
the man who damaged the women when it comes to the professional environment. It's the women who damage the women.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think we shouldn't be thinking like we need to empower each other like as women. I think we all need to empower each other as women and men and
Yes,
like,
yes.
we shouldn't be making even the difference. This is what like I don't even like the other like how now companies they want more diversity. They're looking for women. They have quotas and stuff. Even that I'm against. Like I don't want to be recruited or I don't want to be
It's very
selected.
artificial.
Exactly. Just because
Mm-hmm.
I'm a woman, I think of myself for my like, skill set, for my personality, for what I bring to the table, for my, I don't know, international side. I don't want to be like, I don't put gender at the forefront. I don't want to like people to choose me or to select me because I'm a woman. It's not part of my qualifications for like as a job qualification. So yeah, I think that in both cases, whether it has a positive impact or a negative impact to be a woman, it bothers me because for me it should be just the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is part of the problem. I think women who keep making focus on being a woman are
Yeah.
actually contributing to this whole issue. I've never
Yeah.
made a focus on that. And I've always been an immigrant. So I lived in the US, now I live in France. I've never considered myself as what's it called, minority or something like this. So I never put it
Exactly.
at the forefront. I'm like, no, whatever. I live here, I'm integrated, so I'm not a minority. I'm the same.
Exactly. And you don't have this victimization of, I
Exactly.
don't know, I lost my job. Yeah, I lost my job because a woman, "Ooh, you lost your job, maybe because they're restructuring the company, or maybe because you didn't have the skill set, or maybe for different reasons. But you cannot victimize yourself like every time something bad is happening, it's because you're a woman, or I wasn't recruited, I wasn't selected because I'm a woman.
Right.
But I mean, I'm sure there are like society is never perfect. Like I'm sure there are some flaws. I think salaries are not yet at
That's
equality.
true. That's true.
I think this
But
is one of the frustration as well.
I don't think it's because we undervalue women. It's because women entered the workforce a lot later than men. So obviously they were a lot less skilled and everything. So it's just catching up. I'm not saying that I've never seen a single company in the, 12 years of my career that would on purpose pay less to a woman holding the same position as a man. It would just really be based on experience, etc. If anything, I feel like I, as a immigrant woman, was paid more because I had good negotiation skills. Like, I think it just comes down to that, you know?
This is what I was gonna say. I think that men are also paid better because they tend to oversell themselves more than
Yep.
women.
Yep.
They oversell themselves more than women. And I use the word oversell because sometimes it's a bit like you when you dig into like the profile of the person or the background of the person, it's always like sugar coated. It's like always like more than it
Yep.
is
Yep.
actually. And the woman will do the opposite. It's the women, I think, not underestimate themselves, but they have the tendency to
To make themselves smaller.
exactly
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
have more insecurities. And I think that's also the reason why you see less women founders than men founders. I've always asked myself this question: why do we see less women founder? And I think that first they're more risk averse, and second it's because they don't believe in themselves like men believe in themselves, and so
Yep.
they don't know how to sell themselves. They don't know how to and it's sad because I think some women are like more capable than other men, but I think men have more guts and more like self confidence, and we have more insecurities and like difficulties to like sell ourselves. And you can
Yeah,
even
that's
see it
true.
on LinkedIn. Like you read the LinkedIn of men, and you always have the impression that they are CEOs of like
Yep.
many companies.
Always like top something, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, yeah. I've
Yeah.
definitely seen that as well. Yeah. Sometimes I'm
Oh,
looking at somebody's, we've been hiring recently for a salesperson, and then there were obviously men and women applicants, and then men's profiles are like top B2B seller, blah, 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 blah. But then you look at their actual experience, it's like he worked at two companies. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And they, they have this, I don't know, this ease of like making up stories or like pretending, for example, in a room full of people that they know about the subject, while you know that they don't know, and they do it in a very good way. I would never be capable, like I would never be able to talk about something I don't master or something I don't know.
I feel like I have to guess it probably has to do with their ability to recover. So I think men are just recovering a lot quicker than women. And when something like bad happens to us, it takes us longer to recover. So because of that, we take less risks. But I did see a statistic that said that women founders tend to be more, what's the word? Tenacious. Like they would actually like try to fight until
Resilience.
the end. Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Whereas men could like just simply drop it, but go on to the next thing. And
Yeah.
if a woman founder fails, it's very unlikely that she would do another venture.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think they're more resilient. We have one female founder in our portfolio. It's a portfolio company led by and founded by a woman. It's not in my portfolio. It's my colleague who's following this company. But from what he tells me, he's like she's very resilient. She puts her ego aside. So for him,
Mm,
even it's very
that's another point.
different. Yeah, there's less ego. He told me so for him, it's a pleasure to work with her
I see.
compared to the other portfolio companies because he said it's different. It's a different approach. There's less ego. He can tell her things, how to enhance some stuff, what to do, what to implement, and she will not take it the wrong way. Whereas a man could be like, I know what I'm doing. I don't need, Um,
So they're more
so
open to feedback.
yeah, exactly.
Speaking of all the different soft skills, what would be like a few red flags that you could see in the founder from, I guess, their behavioral and soft skills perspective that you would immediately know, okay, no, we're not investing into that company.
So venture capital, as I always say, at least it's my own opinion, but I think it's especially in the beginning when you're like scouting companies and you're like, doing your due diligence and deciding whether you're going to invest or not. I think the most important point for me is the founder and the personality of the founder, because I've seen in my previous job startups with amazing technologies, amazing business model, everything, the market was there, everything was there, and some of the companies never made it, never scaled up because of the
Oh, wow.
founder, because of the personality. Because so first, one of the red flags for me, so it's very there's a very thin line between. So you need the founder to be self-confident, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't want him to be egomaniac.
I see.
And this is where you need to try to understand if he's just self-confident or he tends to be an egomaniac and like because at the end of the day to be an entrepreneur takes a lot of guts and it's like takes a lot of courage and see
Right.
it has to be someone who has a strong personality and who's like very self-confident, but you need to make sure that he's not an egomaniac who's going to drive the company into bankruptcy because it's only about himself, because it's going to be a one-man show, because maybe he's going to be horrible with his teams and like treat them not in the right way. So you need to make sure that he has a stable and sane personality.
How do you distinguish between the two, between the
It's
self-confidence
very
and
difficult.
arrogance?
It's very difficult. You try to to see him or her as much as you can before the investment and even after the investment. But so myself, my technique is to see how much he's. I remember when I just started in venture capital, one of the first founders I've met who came to pitch us at work at the office, and I think it was a 45-minute meeting. I think for maybe easily 35 minutes, he was talking only about himself, what he did, what he achieved, like I did, and this is me. So my and he's like he talked so much about himself, that my first reaction, and I was very new, I think it was my first month, and I
Uh-huh.
said, is this founder like for real? Like, are they all like that? Like, is he like in love with himself? And so they laughed. And 1 year down the line, I heard that the company was not one of my companies. I heard that the company was doing like really not well. And so I asked why. It's like the founder like is
Just ran
really
into
bad.
the
It's
ground.
like we cannot like handle him. It's difficult to give him any feedback. It's difficult to guide him. He's driving his teams crazy. He's megaloman, so he's seeing like everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so this is so how to detect that? It's very difficult. You need to like read the signs. Someone who's like in love with himself, talking always like with the I did, not talking about his team. A good founder would tell you like, thanks to my team, we did that. Thanks to X or Y, he did that. Or this is a good manager. This is a good founder, someone who's like stable. But also, you need to make sure that it's someone who has values, who's honest, who's not going to keep information from you, who's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's very difficult, it's more difficult than dating or getting married, because you're like, you have to read the personality of the person, and you're actually getting married for at least 10 years before you sell the
Right.
company.
Right.
So it's very difficult. And you're only doing that in a very short period of time, which is the due diligence period, where you're trying to evaluate his personality, which we do in a whole lifetime with our friends or partners or whatever. But yeah, so it's difficult to judge a character. But the more you are in this field, the more like you manage to read people easily. Of course, you will always like get something wrong, and we're all human. We're like far from being perfect, but it becomes easier.
Do you say, would you say there are like different types of personalities that you see as a recurring type? I used to ask this question of my guests, of the founders, at the beginning of the show, in the first few episodes. Like, I think there are like three types. There is the Elon, who is like obsessed with himself and everything is about him, and that's what drives the whole thing. Then there is Jeff Bezos, who is like all about, creating something that will be convenient but also big. And then there is Oprah, who is basically, just trying to help other people. Do you feel like you see those like distinguishable personality types and founders?
Sometimes, yeah, especially the first one. Uh, Sometimes, yeah. Do you have another type of personality, especially in tech, which I forgot about? It's also a red flag for me. It's the very smart guy, the geeky type of guy who's brilliant, but who have no social skills and
So like the opposite.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really a pity, because they're usually brilliant, but you don't want them to drive the company, because commercially, even management, and it will be difficult for them, if you don't
Right.
have those social skills. So this is also another type of intake, that's a type of founder that you meet in the tech space, and you have to make sure that, okay, he's brilliant. I don't know, he came up with a great technology, a great business model, a great idea, but is he fit to run the company? And sometimes it's very difficult, because you're telling, as a board member, as an investor, you're trying to tell the founder not to be the founder, and to not to be the CEO, I mean, and
Take the
to
back
let
seat.
someone else, yeah,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
come. So this is very difficult.
Oh, I heard this myth that one like big, maybe not a red flag, but like a disadvantage that VCs see in the startups is a solo founder. So when it's just one founder. Is it true? And if it's true, to which extent?
I know this. Some people see it this way. I don't, because I've Matt, I've had like portfolio companies in my portfolio where it was solo founder and they were amazing founders. But again, if they have enough perspective to put themselves, more in the backstage when they need to be in the backstage and to let someone else shine. And if, well, it depends on the personality of the person. If he doesn't have an ego problem, an ego issue, it's not going to be an issue because you can resolve that. You can solve that with the governance solutions, with bringing someone in with him. There are many solutions. I don't find it like as a red flag or as a.
Okay, so as we're coming to the end of the episode, at the end I have two traditions. So the first one is giving a homework to the listeners. So it's usually maybe bringing up a couple of things that we discussed throughout the episode and making sure they actually do something practical with it. So I have one big homework, and obviously let me know if which ones you want to add. I usually try to give 2 or 3 on each episode. So making... Sorry. S'il te plaît, on est toujours en... 5 minutes. Sorry. So I think one good piece of homework would be basically like doing a self-awareness exercise with yourself, understanding whether you're confident, whether you have a lot of like ego playing into it. Because while you were talking, I was thinking exactly the same thing to myself because I do coaching with founders. And sometimes it's very hard for me to understand what is playing at the moment. Like, is it confidence or is it ego? Because it's the same as this experience you described. I've seen super talented people and super good companies crash and burn because they would just be so stubborn to do it their way. It's like it has to be their way or no other way. So for me, it's like one piece homework. Please go ahead, test yourself on whether you're confident or whether you have ego problems. What would be something that you would like to give to the listeners as a homework?
The listeners?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe more on all the the first topic we talked about of being a woman in a male-dominated environment. I think the homework would be to ask ourselves, like to ask themselves, why. Actually, why is that a big topic? Like, why do we talk about so much about gender? Why is it an issue? And is it actually in 2024 an issue to be a woman, or are people facing obstacles as being a woman in a male environment, male-dominated environment?
I see. So maybe just like checking with themselves whether it's really an issue for them or they're just using it as an excuse on like victimization card.
Yeah, to go deeper in the subject. So, I mean, again, what is sexual harassment? Define sexual harassment. How is that not in your control?
Mm-hmm.
What I mean? How is that? So it's exactly what you're saying. Why are you in the victim position? Why do some women find themselves in the victim position? Is it something that was out of their control? Is it something that they could have prevented? And then is it because of the type of relationship? Is it like investor-investee or subordination relationship? So I'm just interested in finding out better, like why today this is a topic that comes up a lot
Yeah,
in
that's a good question.
2024.
Right. We're
Yeah.
not in 1994.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And the
Exactly.
last question I usually ask on each episode is what is the one thing that you know today that you wish you could share with yourself like 5 or 10 years ago?
Maybe having more self-confidence earlier.
That would be something that I would say to myself 5 or especially 10 years ago.
And I'm still not there. I'm still not there, but yeah, trying to be more of a
Right.
man in that sense,
I feel like
having
it's
more
always work in
self-confidence.
progress, right? I feel like you just never reach the point where like, yep,
Mm.
I have no issues. I'm so confident. Blah, blah. I definitely have like periods where in one period I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm the best. And then the other period I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so bad.
Yeah. Totally. But I think it's all like I think your self-worth and like your career depends a
Yeah,
lot
that's true.
on that.
That's true.
And your growth, and I think it depends a lot on that. And this is why we still see differences, I think, between men and women, because they have it, like, unfortunately they have much
Yeah,
more
that's true.
self-confidence.
I think that's a really good note to finish the episode on. Neyla, thank you so much for coming on. I think it's been a very interesting angle, very fresh angle to the show, because finally we're talking from the perspective of somebody who looks at the founders and not just the founder speaking for themselves. Thank you so much. If anybody wants
Okay.
to get in touch
Thank
with
you
you,
so much.
should they contact you on LinkedIn or?
Of
All
course.
right. We'll tag
Of course.
your account in the episode description, and thank you again.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.